When a maid's voice shatters the walls of privilege, Adrian Langford's cold world is set ablaze. But can love survive the weight of legacy, class, and a past too painful to sing? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of the Langford estate, casting long shadows across the marble floors. Lucia Benitez, 25, polished the crystal glasses one by one, humming softly to herself as she worked. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat bun, her uniform pressed and spotless. She moved almost like a ghost through the mansion, seen but not acknowledged. "These need to be perfect for tonight," Mrs. Reynolds, the head housekeeper, said as she walked by. "The Langfords are hosting the biggest event of the season." "Yes, ma'am," Lucia replied, holding a glass up to the light to check for smudges. The Langford estate was one of the most prestigious vineyards in Napa Valley. Lucia had been working there for nearly 2 years, living in the small room above, the garage. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. The pay was good enough to send money back home to her mother in Mexico each month. Since her father's accident 3 years ago, and her brother's death shortly after, Lucia had become the family's sole provider. She finished the glasses and moved on to folding the linen napkins into perfect swans. As she worked, she hummed a Spanish lullaby her mother used to sing to her and her brother. The melody was a comfort, a small piece of home in this foreign place where she felt so alone. "You have a pretty voice," said Maria, another maid who was arranging flowers nearby. Lucia stopped immediately, embarrassed. "I didn't realize I was singing out loud." "You should sing more often," Maria said with a smile. "It makes the work—" "Go faster," Lucia shook her head. "I'm not here to sing, I'm here to work." Once she had dreamed of studying music. Back in Mexico, her music teacher had told her she had a special gift. But dreams cost money. Money her family didn't have after her father's accident at the construction site. So instead of sheet music, Lucia now handled bed sheets. Instead of concert halls, she cleaned hallways. By late afternoon, the mansion was transformed. Crystal chandeliers glittered overhead. Fresh flowers filled every corner. Caterers bustled in and out of the kitchen. Lucia had been assigned to serve wine during the event, a job that required her to be present but invisible. "Remember," Mrs. Reynolds instructed the staff, "no engaging with the guests unless they speak to you directly. Keep the glasses full, clear empty plates, and stay in the background." As Lucia changed into her serving uniform, a black dress with a white apron, she thought about the guests who would soon fill the halls. Millionaires, celebrities, business tycoons, people who would look right through her as if she were made of air. The guests began arriving at 7. Women in designer gowns dripping with jewels, men in custom tuxedos smelling of expensive cologne. Lucia moved silently among them, offering trays of champagne, collecting empty glasses. "Have you seen Adrian yet?" she overheard one woman ask. Another, "No, but I hear he's in one of his moods again," the second woman replied. "His latest girlfriend left him, apparently." Lucia knew who they were talking about. Adrian Langford, 31, the only son of Victor Langford, the estate's owner. She had seen him around occasionally, always cold, always distant. He rarely acknowledged the staff, except to issue commands or complaints. As if summoned by the mention of his name, Adrian entered the grand hall. Tall and imposing in his black tuxedo with dark hair and sharp features. He carried himself with the confidence of someone who had never had to worry about money a day in his life. Lucia noticed how the crowd parted for him, how women's eyes followed him, despite his reputation for being difficult. For hours, Lucia moved through the party, refilling glasses and clearing plates. Her feet ached, but she didn't complain. This job put food on her family's table. It paid for her father's medications. Nothing else mattered. She was collecting glasses near the orchestra when she heard a conversation that made her stop. "Adrian, darling, you've been avoiding me all night," said a tall blonde woman, placing her hand on his arm. Adrian Langford removed her hand as if it was something distasteful. "Diana, we've been through this. What happened in Aspen was a mistake." The woman's face flushed. "A mistake? You didn't seem to think it was a mistake when—" "That's enough," Adrian cut her off, his voice sharp. "This isn't the place." Diana's eyes narrowed. You're just like your father, using people and then tossing them aside. At least he has the decency to pretend to be charming." Adrian's jaw tightened. "I think you've had too much to drink. Perhaps you should leave." "Oh, I'll leave," Diana said, raising her voice slightly. "But first, let me tell everyone here what kind of man you really are." Adrian Langford. Several heads turned their way. Adrian glanced around, clearly uncomfortable with the attention. His eyes landed on Lucia, who was trying to make herself invisible behind a pillar. "You there," he called, pointing at her. "More champagne now." Lucia hurried to comply, grabbing a tray of filled glasses from a nearby table. As she approached Adrian and Diana, the tension between them was palpable. "Here you are, sir," she said quietly, offering the tray. But instead of taking a glass, Adrian looked at her with cold eyes. Something in his expression changed, a flash of cruel amusement. Perhaps it was the alcohol or his anger at Diana, or simply his nature. But in that moment, Adrian Langford decided to direct his frustration at the easiest target. "Wait," he said loudly, causing more people to turn and look. "You're the one who sings, aren't you? The maid who sings while she cleans?" Lucia froze, her heart pounding. How did he know that? Had someone complained about her humming? I'm sorry if I disturbed anyone, sir," she whispered. Adrian's lips curled into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "No disturbance. In fact, I think we could use some entertainment." He took the tray from her hands and set it on a nearby table. Then he clinked his glass with a fork, calling for attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced to the now silent crowd, "I've just learned that we have a talented singer among us tonight." Lucia felt the blood drain from her face. She looked around desperately for Mrs. Reynolds for any help, but found none. "This woman here," Adrian continued, gesturing to Lucia, "apparently has a lovely voice. She sings while she cleans our toilets and mops our floors." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Lucia felt shame burn through her body. She stared at the floor, wishing it would open up and swallow her. "Come now," Adrian said, his voice dripping with mock encouragement. "Show us. Entertain us." More laughter followed. Diana was smirking, clearly enjoying Lucia's humiliation as a distraction from her own. For a moment, Lucia considered running from the room. She could quit, find another job. But the thought of her mother waiting for her monthly check, of her father needing his medicine, she couldn't. She looked up and met Adrian's eyes. They were cold, challenging, and something inside her steadied. This man, with all his money and power, thought he could break her. He couldn't. She had endured far worse than public humiliation. She lifted her chin slightly. "What would you like to hear?" she asked, her voice soft but clear. Adrian seemed taken aback by her question. He had expected her to run or cry, not comply. "Anything," he said with a dismissive wave. "Amaze us with your talent." The last word was laced with sarcasm. Silence fell over the crowd as Lucia stepped forward. There was no microphone, no music. Just her and a room full of wealthy strangers who saw her as nothing more than the help. She took a deep breath and began to sing a Spanish lullaby, the same one she had been humming earlier, the one her mother had sung to her and her brother, the one she had sung at her brother's funeral. At first, her voice was soft, almost hesitant. But as the melody took over, she forgot about the crowd, about Adrian, about everything except the words and the memories they carried. It was a song about grief, about love lost, about remembering someone through melody when the world has forgotten them. Her voice filled the grand hall clear and pure. She didn't need a microphone. Years of singing in her church choir back home had taught her how to project. The notes soared to the high ceiling, echoing slightly. As she sang, she noticed the changes in the crowd. The smirks faded. The whispers stopped. People who had been laughing moments ago now stood transfixed. She glanced at Adrian. He was staring at her, the glass in his hand forgotten. The cold amusement was gone from his face, replaced by something she couldn't quite name. Surprise? Regret? She finished the song, letting the final note hang in the air before fading into silence. For a moment, no one moved. No one spoke. Then someone began to clap. Others joined in. Soon, applause filled the room. But Lucia didn't stay to acknowledge. It She dipped her head slightly and then slipped away, back to the shadows where she belonged. She didn't expect praise or apology. She expected to be fired in the morning. She made her way to the kitchen, ignoring the stares from the other staff, who had heard about what happened. She grabbed a clean cloth and began wiping down counters, trying to stop her hands from shaking. A few minutes later, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned, expecting to see Mrs. Reynolds with a pink slip. Instead, Adrian Langford stood in the doorway. He had never set foot in the kitchen before, as far as she knew. He looked out of place among the industrial appliances and busy staff. "May I speak with you?" he asked, his voice lacking its earlier cruelty. Privately. Lucia glanced at the head chef, who nodded, wide-eyed at seeing the boss's son in his domain. Adrian led her down the service corridor, away from the noise of the party and the kitchen. When they were alone, he turned to face her. "Why didn't you tell anyone you could sing like that?" he asked. The question surprised her. She had expected an awkward apology at best, more cruelty at worst. She kept her eyes on the floor. "Because I wasn't singing for anyone's attention," she said quietly. "I was singing to remember the parts of myself I haven't seen in years." Adrian was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different, less hard, less certain. "I behaved badly in there," he said. "I'm sorry." Lucia looked up at him, startled by the apology. "It doesn't matter, sir." "It does matter," he insisted. "I was cruel to you for no reason. You didn't deserve that." She didn't know how to respond. In her experience, men like Adrian Langford didn't apologize to women like her. "Will I be fired?" she asked finally. Adrian looked genuinely surprised. "What? No. Of course not." He ran, a hand through his hair, a gesture that made him seem suddenly younger, less imposing. "Look, But he was interrupted by the appearance of his father at the end of the hallway. "Adrian," Victor Langford called, "the Robertsons are asking for you, something about their investment proposal." Adrian hesitated, looking back at Lucia. "We'll talk more later," he said quietly. Then he was gone, following his father back to the party. Lucia stood alone in the hallway, wondering what had just happened and what it would mean for her future at the Langford estate. The day after the gala, Lucia arrived at work early, expecting the worst. She had barely slept, replaying the events of the previous night in her mind. The humiliation, the song, Adrian's unexpected apology. "Lucia, Mrs. Reynolds wants to see you," Maria said as soon as Lucia entered the staff room. Here it comes, Lucia thought. Despite Adrian's words, she didn't believe she would keep her job. She had caused a scene, drawn attention to herself, the very things the staff was told never to do. Mrs. Reynolds was at her desk reviewing schedules. She looked up when Lucia knocked on the open door. "Come in, Lucia," she said, her expression unreadable. Lucia stood with her hands clasped in front of her, eyes down. "You wanted to see me, ma'am?" "Yes." "About last night," Mrs. Reynolds began. "I'm very sorry, ma'am," Lucia interrupted. "It won't happen again." Mrs. Reynolds raised an eyebrow. "What exactly are you sorry for?" "For singing when asked to by a member of the family. For having a voice that left half the women in tears and—" The men speechless. Lucia looked up, confused. I thought I'd be in trouble." "Quite the opposite," Mrs. Reynolds said, something like a smile touching her lips. "I've had 3 guests call this morning asking about the maid with the voice of an angel. And Mr. Langford, the elder Mr. Langford, specifically asked that you not be punished for what happened." Relief washed over Lucia. "So I still have—" "My job?" "Yes, of course." Mrs. Reynolds shuffled some papers. "Though I must say it was highly irregular. Next time Mr. Adrian puts you in such a position, please come find me first." "Yes, ma'am, thank you." Mrs. Reynolds looked at her thoughtfully. "I didn't know you could sing like that." Lucia shrugged slightly. "It's just something I do. It doesn't matter." It mattered to everyone in that room last night. Mrs. Reynolds returned to her paperwork. "That's all, Lucia. You can start your morning duties." The day proceeded normally. Lucia cleaned bathrooms, vacuumed hallways, dusted bookshelves. The other staff treated her a bit differently, some with newfound respect, others with a touch of envy. She tried to ignore it all and focus on her work. She was polishing the silver in the dining room When she felt someone watching her, she turned to find Adrian leaning against the doorframe. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning, sir," she replied formally, continuing with her work. He stepped into the room. "I meant what I said last night. I'm sorry for how I behaved." Lucia nodded but didn't look at him. "It's forgotten, sir." "Is it?" Adrian walked closer, stopping on the other side of the table. "Because I haven't forgotten it, or your song." Something in his voice made her look up. There was no trace of the cold, arrogant man from the party. He seemed almost vulnerable. "Where did you learn to sing like that?" he asked. "I didn't learn exactly," Lucia said, setting down the fork she'd been polishing. "My mother sang. To us as children. I sang in our church choir. It's just something I've always done." "It was beautiful," Adrian said simply. "The song. What was it about?" Lucia hesitated. She wasn't used to personal conversations with the Langfords. "It's a lullaby my mother taught me, about remembering those we've lost." Adrian was quiet for a moment. "You've lost someone?" "My brother," Lucia said, surprised to hear herself sharing this with him. 2 years ago, he was a guitarist. We used to play music together." "I'm sorry," Adrian said, and he seemed to mean it. Before Lucia could respond, they were interrupted by the arrival of Victor Langford. "Adrian," the older man said, barely glancing at Lucia, "I've been looking for you. We need to discuss the Robertson deal." "Can it wait, Father?" Adrian asked. "I'm in the middle of something." Victor finally looked at Lucia, his expression dismissive. "Whatever you need to tell the staff can be handled by Mrs. Reynolds. This is important." Adrian's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Fine. I'll be right there." As his father left, he turned back to Lucia. "I'd like to continue our conversation another time, if that's all right." Lucia nodded, though she couldn't imagine why the son of her employer would want to talk with her. Over the next week, Adrian seemed to appear wherever Lucia was working. He would watch her fold laundry, polish silverware, or arrange flowers. Sometimes he would ask questions about her family or her life before coming to the estate. Other times he would just sit quietly as she worked. At first it made her uncomfortable. She wasn't used to being noticed, let alone having someone take an interest in her life. But gradually, she began to look forward to their conversations. "My brother taught me to play the guitar when I was 10, she told Adrian one afternoon as she watered plants in the conservatory. "He said my hands were too small, but I was stubborn." "Do you still play?" Adrian asked. He was seated nearby, supposedly reading a book, though Lucia had noticed he hadn't turned a page in some time. She shook her head. "I had to sell my guitar after he died. Medical bills, funeral costs." She trailed off. "What happened to him?" Adrian asked gently. Lucia set down the watering can. "Car accident, a drunk driver." She swallowed hard. "Right after my father's construction accident. That's why I came here. My family needed the money." "And you gave up your music," Adrian said, understanding in his voice. Lucia looked at him, really looked at him for perhaps the first time. "We all give up things, don't we? Even you." Adrian seemed startled by her insight. "What do you think I've given up?" "I don't know," she admitted. "But there's a sadness in you. Like you're searching for something you've lost." Adrian stared at her for a long moment. "You see a lot for someone who tries to be invisible." "Being invisible lets you see things others miss," she replied simply. Their conversations continued. Sometimes brief exchanges as she dusted the library while he worked, sometimes longer talks in the quiet afternoons when the house was empty. Lucia learned that Adrian had studied business at his father's insistence, though he'd wanted to pursue architecture, that he resented the constant pressure to follow in his father's footsteps, that his coldness was a shield against the fortune hunters and socialites who saw him only as the heir to the Langford empire. "My mother died when I was 12, he told her one day as they sat in the kitchen garden. Lucia was taking a short break, and Adrian had brought her a glass of lemonade. "After that, everything changed. My father became obsessed with the business, with legacy. And I became the man at the party," Lucia finished for him. "The one who wanted to humiliate the maid." Adrian winced. Yes, that man. He looked at her, regret clear in his eyes. That's not who I want to be, Lucia. Then who do you want to be? She asked. He had no answer for that. As the days passed, the staff began to notice Adrian's attention to Lucia. Whispers followed her through the hallways. Some were concerned, others curious, a few malicious. Be careful, Maria warned her one evening as they folded laundry together. Men like him don't look at women like us unless they want something. It's not like that, Lucia insisted. We just talk. Maria raised an eyebrow. The son of a millionaire just talks to a maid. Wake up, Lucia. He's either playing with you or he wants to get you into bed. Lucia felt her face flush. You're wrong about him. Am I? Maria asked. I've worked for rich families for 20 years. They don't see us as real people. The words stayed with Lucia. Was Maria right? Was she being naive? But when she remembered the way Adrian listened to her stories, the respect in his eyes when she spoke about her family, she couldn't believe he was just playing with her. One evening, about 3 weeks after the gala, Lucia was cleaning the music room when Adrian entered. He seemed agitated, running a hand through his hair, a gesture she now recognized as a sign of stress. Is everything all right? She asked, setting aside her dusting cloth. No, he said bluntly. My father is impossible. He wants me to marry Diana Jackson. The woman from the party? Lucia asked, remembering the tall blonde. Adrian nodded. Her father owns the largest distribution company in the valley. It would be a strategic alliance. He spat the words. And you don't love her, Lucia stated simply. Adrian laughed bitterly. Love has nothing to do with it in my father's world. It's all about business, connections, money. Lucia returned to her dusting, unsure what to say. This was so far removed from her world, from her concerns about making rent and sending money home. I found something for you, Adrian said suddenly, his mood shifting. He walked to a closet at the far end of the room and returned with a guitar case. Lucia froze. What is this? Open it, he urged, placing the case on a nearby table. With hesitant hands, Lucia unlatched the case. Inside was a beautiful classical guitar, its wood gleaming in the soft light of the music room. I can't accept this, she said immediately. Closing the case. Why not? Adrian asked, clearly surprised by her reaction. It's too much, too expensive. She stepped back from the guitar. People will talk. Let them talk, Adrian said dismissively. That's easy for you to say, Lucia replied, a rare edge in her voice. You're not the one who has to live with the consequences. Adrian's expression softened. Lucia, it's just a guitar. I thought it might bring you some joy, let you reconnect with that part of yourself. She shook her head firmly. No. Thank you. But no. She picked up her cleaning supplies. I should finish my work. Adrian caught her arm gently as she tried to move past him. Why won't you let me do this for you? Lucia looked at his hand on her arm, then up at his face. Because I don't want to be a project. I want to be a person you respect, even when I'm quiet. Adrian released her arm slowly, her words clearly affecting him. You are, he said softly, the most real person I've ever known. Something shifted between them in that moment. Lucia felt it, a connection that went beyond their different worlds, beyond reason, and she saw in Adrian's eyes that he felt it too. Your father is looking for a bride for you, she reminded him, her voice barely above a whisper, and I'm the maid who cleans your toilets. I don't care, Adrian said, stepping closer. You should, Lucia replied, but she didn't move away. Adrian reached out, hesitantly, and touched her cheek. Since that night, since your song, I can't stop thinking about you, about your voice, your words, your strength. Lucia closed her eyes, her heart pounding. This was madness. It could cost her her job, her reputation. But when she looked at Adrian, she saw not the spoiled rich man she'd first thought him to be, but someone struggling to find his own voice just as she was. Adrian, she began, but was interrupted by the sound of footsteps in the hallway. They stepped apart quickly, as Mrs. Reynolds appeared in the doorway. Mr. Adrian, your father is asking for you in his study, the housekeeper said, her eyes taking in the scene with obvious suspicion. "Thank you, Mrs. Reynolds. I'll be right there," Adrian replied smoothly. Mrs. Reynolds lingered. "Lucia, when you're finished here, there are guest rooms that need attention." "Yes, ma'am," Lucia said, keeping her eyes down. When they were alone again, Adrian sighed. "This isn't over," he said quietly. "We'll talk more soon." After he left, Lucia stood in the music room, her emotions in turmoil. The guitar case still sat on the table, a temptation she wasn't sure she had the strength to resist. Later that night, as everyone else slept, Lucia returned to the music room. The moon shone through the large windows, casting silver light across the polished floor. She opened the guitar case and carefully lifted out the instrument. It felt both foreign and familiar in her hands. She sat on a bench near the window and tentatively strummed a chord, then another. The music came back to her slowly at first, then more confidently, like an old friend returning after a long absence. Unbeknownst to her, Adrian stood in the shadows of the hallway, listening. He had come back to the house after driving around, for hours trying to sort out his feelings. The sound of Lucia's guitar had drawn him to the music room. As he watched her play, bathed in moonlight, he realized he was falling in love with her. Not with her voice or her story, but with her. The woman who had reminded him of who he wanted to be. The revelation both terrified and exhilarated him. He knew his father would never accept it. Society would never understand it. But as Lucia began to softly sing, her voice blending perfectly with the guitar, Adrian made a decision. He would find a way to be worthy of her song. The next morning, Lucia returned the guitar to its case and placed it back in the closet where Adrian had found it. She couldn't keep it, shouldn't keep it, but she couldn't deny the joy she'd felt playing music again. For those few hours in the moonlight, she had reconnected with a part of herself she thought was gone forever. "You're smiling today," Maria commented as they prepared breakfast for the family. "Something good happen?" "Just slept well," Lucia replied, unwilling to share her private moment. The morning routine proceeded as usual until Mrs. Reynolds pulled Lucia aside after the Langfords had finished their meal. "Mr. Victor would like to see you in his office," the housekeeper said, her expression concerned. Lucia felt her stomach drop. Had someone seen her in the music room last night? Or worse, had someone seen her with Adrian? Did he say why? She asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Mrs. Reynolds shook her head. "No, but be careful, Lucia. Mr. Victor isn't like his son. He doesn't see the staff as people, just tools." With a growing sense of dread, Lucia made her way to Victor Langford's office. She knocked softly on the heavy oak door. "Enter," came the sharp command from inside. Victor Langford sat behind an enormous desk, reading glasses perched on his nose as he reviewed documents. He didn't look up when Lucia entered. "You wanted to see me, sir?" she asked, standing near. "The door, yes." He finally looked at her, his gaze cold and assessing. "I understand you've been spending time with my son." Lucia felt her cheeks warm. "Mr. Adrian has been kind enough to speak with me occasionally while I work, sir." Victor removed his glasses, setting them carefully on the desk. "Let's be clear. My son may be fascinated by you at the moment. Your little performance at the gala caught his attention, but it will pass." Lucia kept her expression neutral, though his words stung. "Yes, sir. Adrian has responsibilities to this family, to this business. He will be marrying someone suitable, someone who can advance our interests, not someone who cleans our toilets." His voice was matter-of-fact, as if stating an obvious truth. Lucia swallowed hard. "I understand, sir. Do you?" Victor leaned forward slightly. "Because I would hate for there to be any confusion. Adrian may be playing at rebellion, but he knows his duty. Don't mistake attention for anything meaningful." "Is that all, sir?" Lucia asked, fighting to keep her voice steady. Victor studied her for a moment longer. "For now. You may go." Lucia left the office with her head high but her heart heavy. Victor Langford had confirmed every doubt she'd had about her growing feelings for Adrian. Their worlds were too different. Any connection between them was temporary, one-sided, doomed. She threw herself into her work that day, avoiding the places where she might run into Adrian. When she did see him at a distance, she turned and went another way. It hurt, but it was necessary. Victor was right. Adrian had responsibilities, a life planned out for him. She was just a distraction, a novelty. That evening, as Lucia was preparing to return to her small room above the garage, Adrian found her in the laundry room. "You've been avoiding me," he said, standing in the doorway. Lucia continued folding towels. "I've been working, sir." Adrian frowned at the formality. "What happened?" "Last night, in the music room." "Was a mistake," Lucia interrupted, finally looking at him. "Your father spoke to me this morning." Adrian's expression darkened. "What did he say to you?" "The truth," Lucia replied simply. "That you have responsibilities, that I should know my place." "My place is for me to decide," Adrian said firmly. "Not my father." Lucia set down the towel she was folding. "Is it? You've spent your whole life following his rules, building his business. Can you really walk away from all of that?" Adrian didn't answer immediately, which told Lucia everything she needed to know. "That's what I thought," she said softly. "Please, Mr. Adrian, let's not make this more difficult than it needs to be." "So that's it?" Adrian asked, hurt evident in his voice. "You're going to let my father dictate what happens between us?" "There is no us," Lucia insisted, though the words pained her. "There can't be, we both know that." Adrian stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I felt something in that music room, Lucia, and I know you did too." Lucia closed her eyes briefly. "What I feel doesn't matter. I need this job, my family depends on me." "I would never let anything happen to you or your family," Adrian promised. "Until you get bored," Lucia countered. "Or until your father's pressure becomes too much. Or until you realize that a maid from Mexico isn't what you really want." Adrian shook his head. "You're wrong, I've never been more certain of anything." "You barely know me," she reminded him. "I know enough," he insisted. "I know you're strong and kind and talented. I know you put your family before yourself. I know your voice makes me feel things I've never felt before." His words touched something deep inside her, but Lucia forced herself to remain firm. "Please, Adrian, I can't do this. I can't risk everything on a feeling that might not last." Before he could respond, they were interrupted by the sound of the kitchen door opening. Lucia quickly returned to folding towels as one of the younger maids, Emma, entered the laundry room. "Oh, excuse me, Mr. Adrian," Emma said, clearly surprised to find him there. "Mrs. Reynolds was looking for Lucia." "I'll be right there," Lucia said, grateful for the interruption. Adrian looked like he wanted to say more, but instead nodded stiffly and left the room. The next day was Sunday, Lucia's day off. She spent the morning at a small Catholic church in town, praying for guidance. Afterward, she walked through the farmer's market, buying fresh vegetables and fruit to cook a special meal for herself, a small luxury she allowed once a week. As she was selecting tomatoes from a vendor's stand, she felt someone watching her. She turned to find Adrian standing a few feet away. "What are you doing here?" she asked, surprised to see him in such a public place. "Following you," he admitted. "I needed to talk to you away from the estate, away from my father's influence." Lucia glanced around nervously. "People will see us together." "I don't care," Adrian said, taking her grocery bag from her hands. "Walk with me. Against her better." "Judgment." Lucia nodded. They strolled through the market together, drawing curious glances from locals who recognized the Langford air, walking with a Hispanic woman in simple clothes. "I spoke with my father last night," Adrian said as they reached a small park at the edge of the market. "I told him to stay out of my personal life." "How did that go?" Lucia asked, sitting on a bench beneath a large oak tree. Adrian sat beside her, placing the grocery bag between them. "About as well as you'd expect. He threatened to cut me off, remove me from the business." Lucia's heart sank. "I'm sorry. I didn't want to cause problems for you." "You didn't cause anything," Adrian assured her. "This conflict has been brewing for years. You just helped me see that I need to stand up for myself, for what I want." "And what do you want?" Lucia asked quietly. Adrian looked at her intently. "To be my own man, to make my own choices, to see where this connection between us leads." Lucia looked down at her hands. "I can't ask you to give up your family, your inheritance, for me." "You're not asking," Adrian said simply. I'm choosing. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of his words hanging between them. I brought something for you, Adrian said finally, reaching into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a small wrapped package. Adrian, I told you, it's not expensive, he interrupted. Just open it. Reluctantly, Lucia unwrapped the package. Inside was a small hand-carved wooden guitar, a miniature replica of the one in the music room. I made it, Adrian said, a hint of nervousness in his voice. It's not very good, but you made this? Lucia looked up in surprise. Adrian nodded. I used to carve things when I was younger, before my father decided it was a waste of time. Lucia ran her fingers over the tiny instrument. It wasn't perfect. The proportions were slightly off, the details rough, but the fact that he had made it with his own hands touched her deeply. It's beautiful, she said softly. Thank you. Adrian smiled, clearly pleased by her reaction. I wanted you to have something to remind you of your music, something that wouldn't cause gossip. Lucia closed her hand around the small wooden guitar. I don't know what's happening between us, Adrian. It scares me. It scares me too, he admitted, but I think it's worth exploring. Before she could respond, a shadow fell across them. They looked up to find Diana Jackson standing there, elegant in designer clothes, sunglasses pushed up into her perfectly styled blonde hair. Well, isn't this cozy, she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Adrian Langford, slumming with the help? Adrian stood up quickly. Diana, this isn't... Save it, Diana cut him off. Your father told me you've been acting out. I didn't realize how far you'd fallen. She looked Lucia up and down dismissively. She's pretty, I'll give you that. Is this just about getting her into bed, or is there more to it? That's enough, Adrian said sharply. You don't know what you're talking about. Diana laughed, a brittle sound. Oh, please, I know exactly what I'm looking at. A rich boy's temporary fascination with an exotic plaything. She turned her attention to Lucia. Honey, do you really think he's serious about you? Men like Adrian don't marry maids, they just sleep with them until they get bored. Lucia felt her face burn with humiliation. She stood up, gathering her grocery bag. I should go. Lucia, wait, Adrian pleaded, but she was already walking away, his wooden gift clutched tightly in her. And Diana's cruel laughter followed her. That's right, run along back to your little maid's quarters. Adrian caught up to Lucia at the edge of the park. Lucia, please, don't listen to her. Why not? Lucia asked, tears threatening to spill. She's right. This is crazy. We come from different worlds. That doesn't matter to me, Adrian insisted. It matters to everyone else, Lucia said. Your father, Diana's society, they'll never accept me as your equal. I don't care what they think. You say that now, Lucia replied, but you've lived your whole life with their approval, their acceptance. Could you really be happy without it? Adrian ran a hand through his hair in frustration. I'm not happy with it. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Meeting you, hearing you sing, watching you stand up to me, it made me realize how empty my life has been. His words made her heart ache with both joy and fear. I need time, Adrian. This is all happening so fast. He nodded slowly. I understand. Take all the time you need, but please don't shut me out completely. Lucia managed a small smile. I'll try. As they parted ways, Lucia couldn't help but wonder if she was making the biggest mistake of her life, either by considering a relationship with Adrian or by walking away from him. The next morning, she returned to work, the small wooden guitar hidden safely in her room. The estate was buzzing with activity. Preparations for another event were underway. The Langfords are hosting a charity gala this weekend, Mrs. Reynolds informed the staff during their morning meeting. It's to benefit immigrant families and arts scholarships. We'll need everyone working extra hours to prepare. Lucia wondered if Adrian had anything to do with the choice of charity. It seemed too coincidental given their conversations about her family and her abandoned music studies. As the week progressed, Lucia and Adrian maintained a careful distance in public, but he found ways to speak with her privately. Brief moments in empty hallways, notes left for her to find, a flower placed on her cleaning cart. Despite her reservations, Lucia found herself falling deeper under his spell. The way he listened when she spoke, The respect in his eyes, the gentle touches when no one was looking, all of it wore down her defenses. Then, 2 days before the charity gala, Lucia received devastating news from home. Her mother called sobbing to tell her that her father had taken a turn for the worse. The doctors were saying he needed surgery they couldn't afford. "I need to send more money," Lucia told Mrs. Reynolds that evening. "My father, he might not make it without this operation." "I'm sorry, Lucia," Mrs. Reynolds said, genuine sympathy in her voice, "but you've already received your wages for this month, and the next payment isn't for 2 weeks. Is there anything I can do? Extra work, perhaps?" Lucia asked desperately. Mrs. Reynolds shook her head. "I wish I could help, but it's not up to me." That night, Lucia sat on her bed in the small room above the garage, the wooden guitar in her hands, tears streaming down her face. Her father might die because she couldn't send enough money home. The unfairness of it all crashed down on her, working in this mansion of abundance while her family struggled to survive. A soft knock on her door startled her. She quickly wiped her tears and went to answer it. Adrian stood there, concern etched on his face. "Mrs. Reynolds told me about your father. I'm so sorry, Lucia." Lucia stepped back, allowing him into her small room. It was highly improper. If anyone saw him here, the gossip would be unstoppable. But in that moment, she didn't care. "The surgery costs $5,000, she said, her voice hollow. "I've only been able to save half that." Adrian reached for her hand. "Let me help you, please." Lucia pulled away. "I can't take your money." "Why not?" Adrian asked, frustration evident in his voice. "I have more than I could ever need. Let me do this for you, for your family. Because then I'd always wonder," Lucia admitted, voicing her deepest fear. "Is he with me because he cares or because he feels sorry for me? Am I just another charity case to him?" Adrian's expression softened. "Lucia, look at me." He waited until she met his eyes. "I'm not offering help because I pity you. I'm offering because I care about you, about what happens to the people you love." Lucia felt her resolve weakening. Her father's life was at stake. Could she let pride stand in the way of that? "I'll pay you back," she said finally. "Every penny." Adrian shook his head. "There's a better way. The charity gala this weekend, it was my idea. For immigrants and art scholarships. I was hoping to surprise you." Lucia looked at him in confusion. "I don't understand." "The singer we hired for the event cancelled this morning," Adrian explained. "If you were to perform instead, I could ensure you receive a proper performance fee, enough to cover your father's surgery and then some." "Perform?" Lucia repeated, stunned by the suggestion. "In front of all those people? On purpose this time?" Adrian smiled slightly. "You've already proven you can captivate a crowd, and this time you'd be there as a guest artist, not a servant." Lucia's mind raced. The idea terrified her, but the opportunity to earn the money her father needed, to sing on her own terms, it was tempting. "What about your father?" she asked. "He'd never allow it." "Let me handle my father," Adrian said with determination. "This is my event. I'm in charge of it." Lucia looked around her tiny room, at the simple wooden guitar in her hands, at Adrian standing there offering her a chance to help her family and reclaim her voice. "Okay," she said finally. "I'll do it." Adrian's face lit up with a smile that made her heart flutter. "You won't regret this, Lucia, I promise." As he left her room, carefully checking that no one saw him, Lucia wondered if she had just made a terrible mistake or taken the first step toward a new life. The day of the charity gala arrived with a flurry of activity. The Langford estate was transformed once again. Flowers, lights, caterers and staff, all working together to create an elegant setting for the wealthy guests who would be attending. Lucia went about her regular duties that morning, but her mind was elsewhere. She had spent every free moment of the past 2 days practicing for her performance. Adrian had arranged for her to use the music room when she wasn't working, providing sheet music and even a dress for the event. "Lucia," Mrs. Reynolds called as Lucia was dusting the library. "Mr. Adrian would like to see you in the music room." With a nervous flutter in her stomach, Lucia made her way there. Adrian was waiting, a smile lighting his face when she entered. "There you are," he said. "How are you feeling about tonight?" "Terrified," Lucia admitted. "I've never performed on purpose in front of so many people." Adrian crossed to her, taking her hands in his. "You'll be amazing, just like the first time." "The first time I was angry and had nothing to lose," she reminded him. "Tonight is different." "Yes," Adrian agreed. "Tonight you're choosing to share your gift. That makes it even more powerful." He squeezed her hands gently. "I have something to tell you. I spoke with the hospital in Mexico City this morning. They've agreed to schedule your father's surgery for next week. I've made a down payment to secure the date." Lucia's eyes widened. "But I haven't earned the money yet." "Consider it an advance on your performance fee," Adrian said. "I couldn't bear to wait when your father needs help now." Tears welled in Lucia's eyes. "I don't know how to thank you." "Sing tonight," Adrian said simply. "That's all the thanks I need." Their moment was interrupted by the arrival of Victor Langford. The older man's face darkened when he saw their clasped hands. "Adrian," Victor said coldly. "A word, please." Adrian released Lucia's hands reluctantly. "I'll see you tonight," he told her softly before following his father into the hallway. Lucia could hear their raised voices through the door, though she couldn't make out the exact words. She felt sick knowing she was the cause of the conflict between them. Would Adrian resent her for it eventually? Would he come to regret choosing her over his family's approval? That afternoon, Lucia was exempted from her regular duties to prepare for her performance. She bathed in the staff bathroom, washing her hair with the special shampoo Adrian had given her. Then she returned to her room above the garage to get ready. The dress Adrian had provided was hanging on her closet door, a simple but elegant blue gown that fit her perfectly. As she slipped it on, Lucia wondered how different her life might have been if she had been able to pursue her music. Would she be performing regularly? Teaching, perhaps? Would she have met someone like Adrian under different circumstances? A knock at her door broke her reverie. She opened it to find Maria, her eyes wide with surprise. "Lucia, look at you," Maria exclaimed, taking in the sight of her friend in the beautiful gown. "So it's true what everyone's saying." "What are they saying?" Lucia asked, though she already knew. Maria stepped into the room, closing the door behind her. "That you're performing at the gala tonight. That Mr. Adrian arranged it all for you." She hesitated. "That you and he are involved." Lucia sighed. "It's complicated, Maria." "It's dangerous," Maria corrected. "I'm worried about you. These rich people, they play by different rules. Mr. Victor is furious. I overheard him telling Mrs. Reynolds that after tonight, you won't be welcome back at the estate." The news hit Lucia like a physical blow. "He's firing me," Maria nodded solemnly. "After the gala, Mrs. Reynolds tried to defend you, but his mind is made up." Lucia sat heavily on her bed. "What am I going to do? My family depends on this job." "Maybe Mr. Adrian can help," Maria suggested. "He seems to care about you." "I don't want to put him in that position," Lucia said. "He's already fighting with his father because of me." Maria sat beside her, taking her hand. "Then make tonight count. Show them all who you really are." By 7 o'clock, guests had begun to arrive at the estate. Lucia watched from her window as expensive cars pulled up the long driveway, elegantly dressed people emerging to be greeted by staff at the entrance. She should be down there serving drinks or taking coats. Instead, she was waiting to make her debut as a performer. At 7:30, a soft knock came at her door. It was Adrian, handsome in a black tuxedo. "You look beautiful," he said, his eyes taking in the sight of her in the blue gown. "Thank you," Lucia replied shyly. "For everything." Adrian offered his arm. "Are you ready?" Lucia took a deep breath. "As ready as I'll ever be." They walked together toward the main house. Lucia could feel the stares of the other staff as they passed, but Adrian kept his head high, proud to have her on his arm. "My father threatened to cut me off completely if I went through with this," Adrian told her quietly as they approached the house. "He said I'm making a fool of myself and disgracing the family name." Lucia stopped walking. "Adrian, I can't let you sacrifice everything for me." "I'm not sacrificing anything of value," he replied firmly. "For the first time in my life, I'm making my own choices. Do Do you know how liberating that feels?" Before she could respond, they were at the entrance to the grand hall where the gala was being held. The room was filled with well-dressed guests, the same type of people who had laughed at her just weeks ago. Now she was returning, not as a servant, but as the evening's entertainment. Adrian led her to a side room where she could wait until her performance. "The current speaker should finish in about 15 minutes, he explained. "Then I'll introduce you." Lucia nodded, too nervous to speak. Adrian squeezed her hand reassuringly before leaving to rejoin the party. Alone in the waiting room, Lucia paced nervously. What if she froze? What if her voice failed her? What if the guests laughed at her again? She closed her eyes and thought of her family. Her father in the hospital, her mother worried sick. She thought of her brother, who had encouraged her music from the beginning. This performance wasn't just for her or even for Adrian, it was for all of them. When Adrian returned to fetch her, Lucia had found her calm center. She followed him to the edge of the small stage that had been set up at one end of the grand hall. The guests were seated at round tables, their attention focused on Adrian as he stepped up to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "thank you all for coming tonight to support our cause, providing art scholarships for immigrant families. Many talented young people never get the chance to develop their gifts because of financial hardship or lack of opportunity." He paused, his eyes finding Lucia at the edge of the stage. "Tonight, we have a special performer who exemplifies the kind of talent that deserves to be nurtured. Many of you heard her sing a few weeks ago, though under very different circumstances." A murmur went through the crowd as people realized who he was talking about. Lucia saw Victor Langford's face darken with anger. Diana Jackson whispered something to the woman beside her, both of them smirking. "It is my great pleasure," Adrian continued, ignoring them all, "to introduce Miss Lucia Benitez." As applause filled the room, some genuine, some merely polite, Lucia stepped onto the stage. The bright lights momentarily blinded her, but she found her mark next to the microphone. The accompanist Adrian had hired began to play the introduction to her first song, an old Spanish folk song that her mother had taught her. Lucia took a deep breath and began to sing. Her voice trembled slightly at first, but as the music filled her, she gained confidence. She sang of home, of family, of love and loss. She sang in Spanish, knowing that most of the audience wouldn't understand the words but would feel the emotion behind them. As she finished the first song, there was a moment of silence before applause erupted, louder this time, more enthusiastic. Encouraged, Lucia moved on to her second selection, an English ballad about finding strength in difficult times. By the third song, she had forgotten her nerves. She had forgotten the wealthy audience, the disapproving father, the jealous socialite. There was only the music, the pure joy of sharing her gift. For her final number, she sang the lullaby from the first night, the one that had changed everything. But this time she introduced it first, explaining that it was a song her mother had sung to her and her brother, who had died too young. She spoke of how music had connected them, how it had healed her in her darkest moments, and then she sang, pouring her heart into every note. She saw tears in the eyes of many guests. She saw Adrian watching her with a look of such pride and love that it nearly took her breath away. When the final note faded, the room erupted in a standing ovation. People who had looked through her for 2 years now saw her, really saw her. It was a heady feeling, but Lucia knew it wasn't real. Their admiration was fleeting. Tomorrow, most of them would go back to ignoring the help. She took a small bow and left the stage as Adrian returned to thank her and introduce the next speaker. As she made her way to the back of the room, several guests stopped her to compliment her performance. One woman even pressed a business card into her hand, mentioning something about recording opportunities. Lucia smiled and thanked them, but her eyes were searching for a way out. She needed air, needed space to process what had just happened, and she needed to prepare herself for what was coming, the loss of her job, the uncertainty of her future. She slipped out a side door onto a terrace overlooking the vineyard. The night air was cool on her flushed skin, stars dotted the clear sky above, and the scent of roses filled the garden below. Trying to escape your admirers, Lucia turned to find Adrian watching her from the doorway. "Just needed a moment," she replied. It was overwhelming. Adrian joined her at the railing. "You were magnificent." Everyone was captivated. "Not everyone," Lucia said, thinking of Victor's glowering face. Adrian sighed. "My father is stubborn, but he'll come around." "No, he won't," Lucia said gently. "And he shouldn't have to. This is his home, his world. I don't belong here, Adrian." "You belong wherever you choose to be," Adrian insisted, "and I want you to be with me." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Lucia turned to face him fully. "What exactly are you saying?" Adrian took her hands in his. "I'm saying that I love you, Lucia Benitez. I love your strength, your talent, your kindness. I love how you put others before yourself. I love that you stood up to me when no one else would." Lucia's heart raced. "Adrian, we come from such different worlds." "Worlds can intersect," he said. "Can change. My world was cold and empty until you sang that night. You woke something in me, Lucia, something I thought was dead." "Your father will never accept me," she reminded him. "Then it's his loss," Adrian said firmly. "I've spent my whole life trying to please him, to be the son he wanted. It's time I lived for myself." Lucia looked into his eyes, seeing the sincerity there. "What about the estate? The business? Everything you've worked for?" "None of it matters if I'm not happy," Adrian said, "and I'm happiest when I'm with you." Before she could respond, the terrace door opened again. Victor Langford stepped out, his face hard with anger. "So this is where you disappeared to," he said to his son. "The Robertsons are asking for you." "I'll be there in a minute," Adrian replied, not releasing Lucia's hands. Victor's gaze shifted to Lucia. "You've had your performance. I've paid you generously. Now it's time for you to leave my property." "Father," Adrian began, his voice tight with anger, but Lucia squeezed his hands. "It's all right," she told him before turning to Victor. "Mr. Langford, I understand your concerns. You want what's best for your son, for your family legacy. But, with all due respect, you don't get to decide what will make Adrian happy." Victor's face flushed. "How dare you speak to me that way in my own home?" "It's exactly because she dares that I love her," Adrian said, stepping slightly in front of Lucia. "You raised me to be strong, to take charge, to know what I want. Well, I want Lucia in my life." "Don't be ridiculous," Victor snapped. "This infatuation will pass. In 6 months, you'll thank me for ending it now." "No, I won't," Adrian said, calmly. "Because I'm not ending it. If Lucia leaves, I leave with her." Victor stared at his son, disbelief clear on his face. "Say you would throw away everything, your inheritance, your position, your future, for a maid." "For the woman I love," Adrian corrected. "Yes." Something in Victor's expression shifted slightly. He looked at Lucia with new consideration, as if seeing her properly for the first time. "You think you're good enough for my son?" he asked her directly. Lucia met his gaze steadily. "I think love isn't about being good enough. It's about making each other better." Victor was silent for a long moment, studying them both. Finally, he sighed heavily. "You're as stubborn as your mother was," he told Adrian. "She would have liked this one." He turned to go, then paused at the door. "Breakfast is at 8. Both of you be there. We have much to discuss." After he left, Adrian and Lucia stood in stunned silence. "Did he just—" Lucia began. "I think he might be coming around," Adrian said, a note of wonder in his voice. "Or at least considering it." "He still might change his mind," Lucia cautioned. "Then we'll deal with that together," Adrian said. He touched her cheek gently. "I meant what I said, Lucia. I love you, and I choose you, whatever that means for my future." Lucia looked up at him, at this man who had been so cold when they first met, who had tried to humiliate her, who had then opened himself to her in ways she never expected. She thought of her family, of her dreams, of the strength she had found in herself these past weeks. "I love you too," she said softly. "But if we do this, you have to promise me something." "Anything," Adrian vowed. "Promise that you'll listen to my silence as well as my songs," Lucia said. "That you'll stay even when there's no music, when it's just me, quiet and ordinary." Adrian smiled, pulling her close. "Your silence speaks to me just as clearly as your voice," he promised. and there is nothing ordinary about you, Lucia Benitez. In the distance, they could hear the sounds of the gala continuing. Music, laughter, the clinking of glasses. But here on the moonlit terrace, Lucia and Adrian had created their own world, one where a maid could fall in love with the heir to an estate, where a song could change the course of two lives. As Adrian leaned down to kiss her, Lucia felt something settle within her, a sense of rightness, of coming home. There would be challenges ahead. Victor might change his mind, society would judge them. But in this moment, with Adrian's arms around her, Lucia knew they would face it all together. The song that had undressed the room had also undressed their hearts, revealing the truth they had both been hiding, that sometimes love comes from the most unexpected places, and the most beautiful melodies are the ones we never planned to sing. 6 months later, the Langford estate hosted another event, a small, intimate gathering of family and close friends. White flowers lined a path leading to a rose-covered arbor in the garden. Chairs were arranged in neat rows on either side. Lucia stood at the back, her simple white dress catching the late afternoon sunlight. Her mother, now living in a guest house on the estate, adjusted the flowers in her hair. "Are you ready, mihija?" she asked, tears of joy in her eyes. Lucia nodded, too emotional to speak. She looked down the aisle to where Adrian waited, handsome in his tuxedo. Beside him stood his father, still not entirely comfortable with the situation, but making an effort for his son's sake. In the front row sat Lucia's father, healthy and strong after his successful surgery. He stood as the music began, a Spanish guitar playing the melody of the lullaby that had started it all. Lucia took a deep breath and began her walk toward Adrian, toward their future together. She had found her voice that night at the gala, but more importantly, she had found someone who heard it, who heard her, even in her silence. As she reached him and took his hands in hers, Adrian whispered, "Ready for the second verse?" Lucia smiled, and all the verses after that. Together they turned to face the minister, ready to begin the next chapter of their song. The end.